Hello and welcome back to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, November 7th, and we have a great show for you today. We have Alexandra Vecchio as our guest. She is the Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources for the Town of Brookline. She's new to the job, but not to town. And we have a great conversation teed up with her, recorded about a week and a half ago. But first, as always, we begin with the news. And as you might expect, that news is about the election on Tuesday. The United States chose former President Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential election, sending him back to the White House in January 2025. While there are still outstanding votes in several states, Trump has won the necessary 270 electoral votes to win the presidency, buoyed by wins in the Rust Belt and Sun Belt states. Republicans have regained control of the United States Senate with wins in Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia. Control of the House of Representatives remains uncalled, although likely will go to the Republicans. There are over a dozen seats across the country that remain too close to call. States like California, which includes several congressional districts not yet determined, typically take a while to count their votes. Massachusetts elected Senator Elizabeth Warren to another term in the United States Senate and is sending the entire congressional delegation back to Congress. There are still races at the state level that remain uncalled, but Democrats will continue to hold supermajorities in both chambers. So far, Republicans picked up 2 seats in the state House, the 5th Bristol and 6th Plymouth seats, while Democrats picked up the 1st Plymouth seat. With the votes still being counted, the final margin for the ballot questions remain to be determined. The AP has called all 5 questions. Questions 1, 2, and 3 all received a majority of yes votes. Questions 4 and 5 failed to receive a majority of yes votes. Brookline supported both Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren by considerable margins. On the ballot questions, Brookline supported questions 1, 3, and 5 and voted against both 2 and 4. Brookline also sent Senator Cindy Cream back to the State House, along with Representatives Tommy Vitolo, Kevin Honan, and Bill McGregor. In the 12th Middlesex District, comprising of much of South Brookline and South Newton, Greg Schwartz will be the new representative, as Representative Ruth Balzer declined to seek re-election. Folks, that's the news. Yes, it's all about elections. And yes, I am delighted to be back. If you have ideas on potential guests, please let me know. You can give me a call at 617-872-8921 or go to my website, www.tommyvitolo.com, to find other ways to get in touch with me. I hope that you will stay tuned. On the flip, we will roll that interview with Alexandra Vecchio, the Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources for the Town of Brookline. And welcome back to our first interview in quite some time. I took a little bit of a break, and we've got lots of great guests coming up. But our first great guest coming up is the guest we have today, Alexandra Vecchio. She is the Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources here at the Town of Brookline. Alexandra, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
And I know you've been working on behalf of the town for quite some time, and this is a new role for you. So, what have you been doing your whole life? Tell us about yourself.
Sure. Well, I guess I will say I have been with the town for coming up on 4 years now, but really previously have held a few different positions that all kind of relate to this world of sustainability and climate action. So my story, I always say, begins in college. I did not grow up in an environmental household. That was not how I was raised, and I moved to college undecided on what my future would hold. And I ended up taking a general ed theology class that was called Moral Problems, the Ecology Crisis. And we read a book by Lester Brown called Plan B 2.0. And it was all about climate change and the impacts on ecology, and that was it. I was hooked. I knew that that was my call to action and what I needed to spend my life doing. And so since then, I've worked for a member of Congress as his energy and environmental legislative assistant on Capitol Hill for a few years. I've gone on to get my master's degree at Yale School of the Environment and have worked as the climate change program director for Mass Audubon, a nonprofit here in Massachusetts. And then the last 4 years I've spent here with the town of Brookline. So I've served as the director of parks and open space, and have had the pleasure of working within the Department of Public Works as that division director and working on a wide variety of sustainability projects during that time. So when this opportunity came to be, I decided to toss my hat in the ring for it because it felt like the perfect next step for me and a great fit for the town.
Well, we are delighted that we still have you. I want to actually, try to understand the role. I think everybody's going to kind of invent their own, what does the czar of sustainability do? And I think in some ways that's healthy for us to imagine all of the things that you could do. There's only one of you. Um, and so you're limited by your own availability, if nothing else, but you're limited also by the role of the job. So maybe it would be helpful to explain to us what the role actually is as you understand it. So viewers at home can kind of understand, where we ought to expect you and where we ought to say, well, that's probably not her job. That's probably someone else's.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think historically in Brookline, the role of sustainability and that staff person has really evolved over time. And I see this as the next iteration of that. So we are forming a new division within the Department of Public Works, the Sustainability and Natural Resources Division. So this is no longer a team of one, or at least we plan for it not to just be a team of one, which I think is very exciting, to your point of only so many hours in the day, so much to do on this topic. The second thing is that this is really going to look like a different team than you've seen elsewhere, I think, in town government. It is really meant to be an interdisciplinary team, an interdepartmental team, and really intended to pull in all the areas of technical knowledge and expertise that we need to be able to get the results that we as a town are looking for, and we as society are looking for as it relates to climate change and our natural resources. So all that to say that the responsibility for myself as the director of the division is one to staff up that team, to build a team that includes hopefully 2 new staff, including a deputy director of sustainability, as well as a program manager. And then also includes what is our conservation and natural resources manager. So that's a pre-existing town that was in the position before, or excuse me, pre-existing position that's been in the town before. And now will be part of this division, as well as an administrative assistant to support that team. And then we'll have what we call dotted lines out to a couple of different departments and divisions as well. Again, that's something unique, I think, for the town. So one will be to the building department and their deputy director of public buildings, and one will be to our urban forestry manager, which is within Department of Public Works, Parks and Open Space Division. And so that's kind of the core team, as you will. And then the idea is that there's this team that sits within it that is made up of a lot of different representatives across the town government, all as it relates to the actions that we need to take to address climate change and build a more sustainable community. So that's transportation, that's stormwater management, that's our landscape architecture and design, that's emergency preparedness and response, that's looking at our own fleet and our own operations of our buildings and building management. So the idea is that that team is coming together to work towards our collective goals around sustainability. So while the division does have a large charge, it's, both this conservation and natural resources management, as well as climate action and climate resilience. It really is looking at casting a wider net for how we achieve those goals by bringing in so many different experts from across the town.
So you mentioned this, alluded to this a little bit, and it's something that I've been thinking about. Government is structured to be very siloed, like it or not. And so you are within DPW. And so talking with engineers, transportation, that's in DPW. That feels like that's pretty easy. You go across the hall. But you mentioned procurement. That's Dave Giannakakis. He doesn't work for DPW. You mentioned buildings, right? Charlie Simmons doesn't work for DPW. He's the guy who sets every thermostat in town, right? But he doesn't work for DPW. You want enforcement? Well, that's the police department. They're separate. And we can go on and on. And I wonder, do you feel like you have buy-in, both from above you all the way up to the sixth floor, all the way up to Chaz, the town administrator, and across other departments? Do you feel like you'll be able to work sort of broadly across town as the job calls for it?
Yeah, great question. And you're right. This is not, government isn't great at this. And historically, we kind of exist in our silos, in our bubbles, and in our chains of command. So that is a real challenge. I think what we have here is a definitely committed leadership from the top down to look at this a different way. You know, this new structure, this new division, while I'm excited and honored to be here and stepping into this role, this was really envisioned by Chaz, by the select board, by our town administrator, and the select board team that supports us. So I think there's buy-in there for this to be a different structure and a different outcome from that. And so that leadership, I think, is really important. I know there's also a real commitment from my supervisor, my boss, Aaron Shute, the Commissioner of Public Works, for what this new division looks like, and making sure that there's a lot of buy-in across her department to help support this work. And then I think really what I have seen from conversations with other department heads across the town is like, yes, we want to do this work. You know, this is very important. It's just we have so many other things that we also need to do. And I don't have, someone that's assigned to do it. And so I think what will be helpful is that this division will help to bring in some of those additional resources, whether it be funding resources, whether it be technical expertise, whether it be, identification of grants, and really help to operationalize what people have been thinking about and wanting to do for some time, but just haven't had the capacity with their own departments and divisions to do. So I do think there is that buy-in there. And I also think there's some excitement for what this new structure looks like and what it can result in for everybody.
Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources. They're related. They are two separate things. How are you thinking about each of those things long term?
Sure. I think when it comes to sustainability, everyone kind of has their own definition of it because it's such a broad word and it means so much. And so I think, there is some particular thought that went into this title and this division. It is meant to be all encompassing. And that's because there are all of these different interconnection pieces that we've talked about. I think that for this to be successful and for this to work, we need to be really clear about what are the action items that we are going to take on and what are the items that we can't, that we don't have the capacity, the resources, the knowledge, whatever the case may be. And so for me, that really starts with defining our goals really clearly and then defining how we're going to implement those really clearly. And so I think for us, that's really thinking about, two guiding documents. That's thinking about our town's climate action plan, which we already have one. And I think really it's almost an update to that plan. And then the other is our open space plan as well, which really looks at our natural resource management. And I think making sure that open space plan has a very particular focus on climate action through nature-based climate solutions, through green infrastructure, through our transportation networks, through interconnectedness. So I think, with that lens on it, there's a great deal of overlap, but there are obviously things, in that category that won't be the focus necessarily of our division, especially will probably fall more into the parks and recreation space as opposed to open space and natural resource management. But I think those two guiding documents are really what are critical. Get those right and figure out how do we implement those? How do we make those a reality as opposed to just an idea that sits on a shelf?
So I'm glad you bring up implementation. The first 90% of the work is coming up with a plan. And then the other 90% of the work is executing the plan. It's not 90-10, it's 90-90.
Yeah.
And Brookline does a really nice job, in my view, bringing people together, sort of seeking out all of those different viewpoints, finding volunteer experts throughout town who really contribute in meaningful ways, and combining that with great staff to come up with really comprehensive plans, really thoughtful and holistic ideas. But the budget's the budget, right? The money's the money. Now, it's not quite that straightforward because there's all kinds of federal and state grants. There's the CPA, right? There's always the opportunity for an override or a debt exclusion if the situation calls for it. It's not so rigid, but the money's the money. And, for every dollar in revenue, there's $3 in wants and needs by the town. And so what are your thoughts on implementation? How are we going to move from here's what's on the page to here's what's getting done and here's what's being prioritized?
Yeah, great question. I think a little bit of that needs to come out of the planning process. I don't think the planning process can just be, all right, this is our overall goal, and here are some things that help achieve that goal. It needs to be, okay, here's our overall goal. Here are some things to help achieve it. Now, which of these things are most fundable? Which of these things are going to create the biggest impact for maybe the least amount of dollars or the least amount of effort, to be quite frank? And which of these are within the realm of reason for us as the town to take on versus which are things that we are going to need regional collaboration on or state support on, or we're influencing policymakers at higher levels to be able to change the outcome here. And so I think really understanding in that planning process what we're prioritizing and why based off of the feasibility of it. And so then kind of creating almost this matrix that looks at, all right, what are our goals? What's going to get us there? What are the resources to get us there? And then who's responsible for it? And then applying that to any new initiatives or ideas that come up as well, and any new opportunities that might result after this, planning process is through and as we're in the implementation phase. So I think it has to be something that as we approach the implementation, we need to understand that there are some things that are more feasible than others, and we have to, because of where we're at collectively with climate change and where we're at politically, we have to go after the things that are feasible.
Do you have any early favorites, any things that you're thinking that, okay, maybe the town hasn't quite grabbed this juicy low-hanging fruit yet, but you think it's there? Or you got any things sort of like previews for what you think no promises, just
Yeah,
suggestions? You
I
got any
appreciate
ideas?
that. I appreciate that prelude to it. I think the thing is, we know what to do. We've known what to do for some time now. And I often use this metaphor of like everybody grabbed their rowboats, their oars for the rowboat a long time ago, and they've got them, but some people have them pointing this way and some people have them pointing this way. And some people are like, oh, I don't actually know how to hold this and what to do. And some people are rowing here and some people are rowing there. Like what we need is everyone to row in the same direction because we're just going to have so much more impact from that. And so I think some of those ideas have already been out there. We just haven't all been rowing towards them. So some simple, straightforward things that we're already seeing progress on. But the, energy efficiency and electrification of our own town buildings, like let's prioritize and focus and figure out where we can get the dollars to execute there. What buildings are the most reasonable for us to do, and which are the ones that we just need to focus on, weatherization and energy efficiency upgrades, which is still an improvement to what we have. So let's look at our building stock. Let's look at our transportation system here. The town has its own fleet that we utilize on a daily basis. How are we thinking about electrification of that fleet for vehicles that it's feasible? And then how are we making sure that we're providing the electrification opportunities for people in their own personal vehicles as well, and making that as easily and accessible as possible? And then how do we think about both our own education and outreach and the outreach from other groups and entities to help people execute that in their own personal lives, to help with private development, residential, commercial, to make sure that we are in line with everything that we're doing at the town level. So I think those are kind of some clear items that are in front of us that we absolutely have the knowledge, resources, a bandwidth to be able to do. It's just, again, getting ourselves all rowing towards those at the same time. And then simultaneously, I will also say, I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to look at sustainability holistically and think about what we can do in terms of our natural environment to help support sustainability, how we can think about our own waste systems to support sustainability, and how we can think about our own preparedness as well, that hopefully results in both preparedness for climate change and also builds more resilience to it as well. And so I think there are opportunities there that are really exciting. One that, we just launched in Brookline, our first compost waste drop-off bin program as a pilot. We have over 550 residents participating in that. It's only been live for about a month. And so really looking at what are ways that we can make sustainability really visible, really accessible, really easy for people to participate in. And I think there are some opportunities in those categories as well.
Well, as you know, sometimes the hard part about this job is when executed correctly, the results are invisible, right? So an electric garbage truck or an electric police cruiser is not really so obvious. Maybe it's not as loud.
Yeah.
So like what you should be hearing is the space in between the things. But we have those, right? We have trials for both of those, if my understanding is correct, right? They're on the streets.
They are.
And so, when we electrify a building correctly, no one notices because the heat still comes on, the cooling still comes on, the humidity is still under control. And we've dramatically reduced the carbon out of the gate, and we've got a plan to get to zero because electrical buildings can be reduced all the way down to zero emissions, right? And so do you have plans to toot your own horn and toot the horn of the town? These are all the things that, both the things that we've done that can be helpful to you, like we just installed 42 electric vehicle chargers, here's where they are, but also, hey, we did this thing, you would never know it but for the fact that we're telling you, and we're telling you because we're proud of all the people who did the work, because we're proud as a community, and because maybe it'll give you an idea that you're not going to buy your own electric garbage truck, I hope, but maybe inspire you to figure out where you could do something of a similar vein. Do you have plans for that? Is the town really going to lean into that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, and this is really critical for when you have a big, wicked, systematic problem like climate change. It's so many things and it becomes so overwhelming to people. There needs to be clearly communicated wins. You just do. People need wins to keep going. And so I think that we could do a better job of making it really clear, here's what we're doing, and here's when we checked that box, and here's what it means for you. So I think a great example of that, you mentioned the EV charging, but I also think the Brookline Green Electricity Program is an excellent example of this, right? Because, this is something that the town has worked on for many years. I know you've been involved in this. We just renewed our contract. And in fact, if you are participating in this program, the new rates that are coming up for December 2024 through December 2027 are actually lower than the rates for an Eversource basic package. And so this is a way that it's a win for us as a community, it's a win for the town, but it's also a win for you as a resident. It's saving you money and it's allowing your choices to be more sustainable and easier. And so I think to the extent we can, we absolutely have to share what we're doing with residents, but we also have to get them excited. Like, this is good for you. Like, join us in this work that we're doing. And so I think that our communications and outreach about this is going to be really critical. And in fact, one of the things that we're looking to do when we update our climate plan is to create a dashboard of sorts that really helps people visualize, this is what we're working towards, and this is where we're at in meeting that goal. I think that transparency in the data and the information also is really helpful to get people excited. And so we have a real opportunity to do a better job of that and to make it a little bit more in your face and get people excited to participate.
Carol Oldham and I were the town meeting members who filed the warrant article to create the green electricity program almost a decade ago at this point.
Yeah.
As long ago as that sounds. We've talked about climate, and I could do that all day, as you know, but I do also want to talk about the open space part of it. Your role is very much both. And I attended maybe it was a planning event at 22 Tappan Street recently. And things that I knew to be true still kind of hit me over the head with a frying pan. And that is, when it comes to open space and parks in general, there is a really dramatic north-south divide in town. North Brookline is like Somerville.
Mhm,
South Brookline is like Newton. And it's really dramatic. Uh,
mhm.
and there's a lot of reasons for that. And changing land use is a very, very slow and expensive process. Um, and so I wonder, are there plans for either giving people in North Brookline better access to the jewels of South Brookline? My family doesn't own a car. It used to be we would go to Lars Anderson once a year when we had Brookline Day at Lars Anderson. Now we go to Lars Anderson 0 times a year because there's no way for my family to get there. And so, are there plans to either create more opportunities in North Brookline for ball fields, for recreation, or to help people in North Brookline more easily get to South Brookline to use the resources that the town has that are just not in places where an awful lot of people live?
Yeah.
How do we navigate that?
No, yeah, that's a complicated piece, and one that I know the town has thought about and struggled with for some time, right? Where are our largest parcels of open space, and how do we get people who need to get there to them to enjoy them and activate them? I think part of this can be addressed, what we're talking about right now with our open space plan is how do we create these interconnected green corridors? How do we make it easier for people to get from one green space to the next, and along the way have a small, green corridor that connects the two as well. And so that could be through walking or biking, some sort of shared transportation option. So really thinking about how critical access is to open space, bringing all of its values and all of its worth forward for a community. So I think that's something that absolutely is, on the radar as we develop this next open space plan. And we are looking at ways to both increase the ecological value of that interconnectedness and also increase the opportunity for folks as well. The other thing that I think we need to look at and think about is how do we work with, public-private partnerships to make sure that there is open space that is available that isn't just procured and managed through the town. So how do we look at, some sort of opportunity for green space to increase through some commercial project that then is open to all to use and all to enjoy? And I know that's something that in Somerville they've really looked at, and in some of our other more kind of dense urban concrete jungles, that's something that they've really thought about. And I think that's something particularly in North Brookline we want to see.
Alexandra Vecchio, Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources in the town of Brookline. New to the job, not new to town, not new to the mission. Thank you so much for coming on Brookline Interactive Group. We're very grateful to kick off our fall interview series with you. And of course, we wish you nothing but success in the days, weeks, months, years, and decades to come.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thanks for all you do for the town of Brookline. I really appreciate it. And it's exciting. We've got a lot in front of us, and it's going to be a really, really great year. So looking forward to it.
And for all the viewers, you've been watching TV on TV here on Brookline Interactive Group, and we will see you here next week.